December 8, 2017 918 MS December 8, 2017 915 MS Rankings 1 Look at our Week 14 Fantasy Defense Rankings and you might head to the waiver wire in search of a streaming option. Our Week 14 Fantasy Defense Rankings are all about matchups. Sure, we give the benefit of the doubt to a few of the top units and still have them in the starters tier, but with so many mediocre to unfavorable matchups for good DSTs and so many favorable matchups for bad DSTs, you can bet more than a few owners with head to the waiver wire for a streamer pickup this week. The Bengals vs. Bears, Packers at Browns, Bears at Bengals, Cowboys at Giants, Jets at Broncos, Bills vs. Colts, Titans at Cardinals, and even the Colts at Bills and 49ers at Texans are potentially in play this week. That might seem crazy, but look at the matchups for teams like the Vikings at Panthers, Panthers vs. Vikings, Eagles at Rams, Rams vs. Eagles, and Ravens at Steelers. Do you really trust any of them? Unfortunately, there's no good answer. You can stick with what you got. You hear our play the matchup. There's a case for both, but after watching Denver at Dolphins, Arizona vs. Rams, Buffalo vs. Patriots, Indianapolis at Jaguars, the Giants at Raiders, Cleveland at Chargers, and Houston at Titans, all give up top 12 weeks to DSTs last week and not all to good defenses. Picking on bad opponents seems safer. Week 14 rankings: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker. Reminder: we'll update our rankings throughout the week and add player analysis, so please check back often. And here's how you could lose in fantasy in Week 14. Week 14 DFS Yahoo GPP lineup: Y Cash DK GPP FD GPP FD Cash Values Stacks DFS lineup builder. Week 14 Fantasy Football Rankings Defense. These rankings are for standard leagues. 1 New England Patriots at Dolphins. Patriots continue to limit points 17 or fewer in 8 straight games and pile up sacks 11 in past 2 games and turnovers 8 in past 4 games. The Dolphins hemorrhage points to fantasy defenses, including 7 sacks and 3 takeaways to the Patriots just 2 weeks ago. 2 Pittsburgh Steelers vs. Ravens. Pittsburgh remains one of the top pass rushing teams in the NFL, and the Ravens have had problems with such teams most of the season. When these teams met in Week 4 in Baltimore, Pittsburgh had 4 sacks and 3 takeaways while limiting the Ravens to 9 offensive points. The Steelers can pressure Joe Flacco into some mistakes. 3 Cincinnati Bengals vs. Bears. Chicago didn't turn the ball over in Week 13 against San Francisco, but it allowed multiple sacks and scored fewer than 18 offensive points for the 9th time this season. Cincinnati has a top pass rush and has been getting takeaways lately, putting it in a good spot against Mitchell Trubisky in Cincinnati. 4 Green Bay Packers at Browns. The Packers took advantage of a sloppy Bucs team last week, racking up 7 sacks, a fumble recovery and a defensive touchdown. This week, they get the best possible matchup, facing a Browns team that allows over 3 sacks and 2.5 takeaways per game. The Packers will allow yards and even some points, but they will also score plenty of fantasy points. 5 Denver Broncos vs. Jets. Denver's disappointing DST came alive in a favorable matchup, posting 2 sacks, 3 takeaways and a defensive touchdown. The Jets managed to keep things under control last week against a weak Chiefs defense, but in the 2 previous games, one of which was against Tampa's poor defense, the Jets allowed 9 sacks, 3 takeaways, and 2 DST touchdowns. Even though the Broncos' defense appears to be trending downward and the Jets' offense is trending upward, you have to like the Broncos at home against an often sloppy offense. 6 Los Angeles Chargers vs. Redskins. A string of favorable matchups has elevated the Chargers to must-start status, and now they get a struggling Redskins team that's allowed 10 sacks and 5 takeaways against the Giants and Cowboys in consecutive weeks. Washington can put up points in a hurry, but the Chargers' pass rush always gives them a high floor. 7 New York Jets at Broncos. The Broncos will continue to give up a lot of fantasy points thanks to their lackluster QB play. The Jets have been among the worst fantasy DSTs this season, but they have been able to take advantage of favorable matchups, posting 3 takeaways against the Browns, 6 sacks and 4 takeaways in 2 games against the Dolphins, and 7 sacks and 3 takeaways against the Bills. They can have a good fantasy day here, too. 8 Dallas Cowboys at Giants. Geno Smith's Giants starting debut didn't go well, as he took 3 sacks and turned it over twice against a poor Raiders defense. Update: Eli Manning is starting. Dallas is expected to get Sean Lee back, and that's big for a team that struggles against the run without him. The Cowboys are coming off one of their best games, 4 sacks, 4 takeaways, and can take advantage of this matchup. 9. Chicago Bears at Bengals. The Bears' defense continues to play well, and even though HASNT put up huge fantasy numbers outside of a couple games earlier in the season, it has the potential week in and week out. The Bengals tend to give up turnovers in bunches, and on a short week, they could be even sloppier than usual. 10. Jacksonville Jaguars vs. Seahawks. The Jags get the benefit of the doubt despite a tough matchup. Jacksonville remains fantasy number 1 DST, getting it done with its pass rush and with takeaways. Seattle has some issues blocking, though Russell Wilson makes up for that with his scrambling ability. Jacksonville will bring enough pressure to cause some mistakes and pay off for fantasy owners. 11. Buffalo Bills vs. Colts. The Bills' defense has been in free fall since getting rid of Marcel Darius, but the Colts have been almost as generous to fantasy DSTs as Cleveland. With 32 sacks allowed in its past 6 games plus 6 turnovers and 2 DST TDs, Indianapolis is capable of giving up points to anyone. 12. Tennessee Titans at Cardinals. In 3 Blaine Gabbert starts, Arizona has allowed 9 sacks, 6 takeaways, and 2 DST touchdowns. The Titans have 12 sacks and 2 takeaways the past 2 games, limiting Tom Savage and the Texans to 13 points, 4 sacks, takeaway in a similar matchup last week. 13. Seattle Seahawks at Jaguars. Blake Bortles and the Jaguars haven't been terrible this year, but in the 3 games prior to Week 13, they gave up 8 sacks and 6 takeaways. Seattle is still getting multiple sacks and at least 1 takeaway per game, so the Seahawks still have a decent floor here. 14. Detroit Lions at Bucks. Jameis Winston looked sloppy in his first game back last week, and the Lions have taken advantage of sloppy QBs all season. Despite a horrible showing last week against Baltimore, Detroit has the potential for multiple sacks and takeaways. 15. Indianapolis Colts at Bills. With Nathan Peterman set to start for an injured Tyrod Taylor, fantasy owners can't help but remember what happened in Peterman's last start: 5 INTs before halftime. The Colts are much worse than the Chargers, but their 10 INTs are middle of the pack and show they can still put up some points against bad QBs. 16. Baltimore Ravens at Steelers. 17. Philadelphia Eagles at Rams. 18. Houston Texans vs. 49ers. 19. Minnesota Vikings at Panthers. 20. Arizona Cardinals vs. Titans. 21. Washington Redskins at Chargers. 22. New Orleans Saints at Falcons. 23. Los Angeles Rams vs. Eagles. 24. Carolina Panthers vs. Vikings. 25. San Francisco 49ers at Texans. 26. Kansas City Chiefs vs. Raiders. 27. New York Giants vs. Cowboys. 28. Cleveland Browns vs. Packers. 29. Oakland Raiders at Chiefs. 30. Tampa Bay Buccaneers vs. Lions. 31. Atlanta Falcons vs. Saints. 32. Miami Dolphins vs. Patriots.